Good morning, Baltimore. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich, alongside Ravens reporter Sam Cohn. Today is Monday, June 15th. The Orioles are fresh off of a series loss to the San Diego Padres, but have an off day before heading west for a three-city road trip against Seattle, Los Angeles, and Anaheim. Sam, how are you doing, man?
Good. If the Ravens are technically on summer vacation until training camp, then I consider myself technically on summer vacation. So summer reading, I go sit by the pool, go on vacation, try to get some downtime, and make sure I'm podcasting. Those are what is that, the big four, big five of summer
Yeah,
vacation that everyone does?
and watch the NBA Finals. What do you think of the Knicks run there?
Holy cow. Not a Knicks fan. Didn't grow up a Knicks fan. Didn't grow up not enjoying the Knicks. Uh, but good for them. That was a lot of fun. That was a really, really fun. I mean, I have a lot of family in New York. I have people in my life who are huge Knicks fans. So it was really cool to see them break a 53-year drought with that team and that run. I was definitely pulling for them most of the way, especially in that final series. I think that the two moments that are probably my favorite, like, I mean, OG Anunoby's tip in will
Mm-hmm.
live on highlight reels forever and ever and ever. But Mike Brown yelling "Who let the," like singing "Who let the dog," like taking the mic from Ernie Johnson and singing "Who let the dogs out," maybe one of my favorite moments. That, and then there was a clip. I think it was after the night of the OG shot after Game 4 when all the New Yorkers flood the streets, and there was some clip of a guy with a traffic cone, and he chucks it behind his back, and it lands perfectly on a dude's head. And
Yep,
I was
I
like,
saw
yeah,
that.
they can't lose. They can't
I
lose. This is a
I
team of
also
destiny.
I also saw someone chuck a banana across the crowd in New York, and then the banana came back, and the same guy caught it. So
No way.
things were just happening in ways that we will never understand in New
Yeah.
York this week. Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it's not often that a team from New York, the number one media market in America, is an underdog. But
Hmm.
that is just, it felt that way in every sense of the word. I mean, the Spurs just feel like a dynasty in the making. They have, Wembanyama, one of the best up and coming players in the world. The biggest star for the Knicks is Jalen Brunson, a former second round pick, undersized, counted out constantly throughout his career. Just all of it coming together, plus the city just being so starved for a championship, you couldn't help but root for the Knicks. So I was certainly happy with it from a unbiased standpoint. And I think it's now what 9 straight years that the NBA has had a different champion every year, no
Yeah.
repeats. So
Yeah,
I
which is
mean,
which is crazy.
I love that. I think that the way that the NBA was when it was just Cavs Warriors every year got to be boring. I kind of fell out of NBA fandom a little bit. The Wizards being absolutely terrible, part of that calculation as well. But now to see just like a different team, a different star, kind of getting a chance every year, I think is really cool and great for the state of competition across the league, even if tanking is still quite the issue over there.
Not that we really want to spend a ton of time on this, but I put this in our doc just because, like, I think it's an interesting thought exercise, to just like imagine what it would be like for the Orioles to get over that hump. I mean, they've had a 42-year drought. They're not quite at the level of the Knicks, 53 years in, as you said, like the biggest market in the country. It's certainly not the same, but to watch all those videos, to see the unbridled joy in New Yorkers, just to read all of this stuff about how happy and how awesome it is for everyone, to see the way these people come together is really, really cool. It's just funny to think about and to imagine, like, what would Baltimore look like if it had that kind of moment in 26, 27, 28, to break that drought.
Yeah, I mean, there would be so much release because not just the fact that they haven't won a championship in that time, but the Orioles have had so many losing seasons, long streak of it, at the tail end of Cal Ripken's career into, kind of the nothingness that was after that. And then they break through a little bit, in the 2012 to 2016 era, but never make it past the ALCS and now go through a full on rebuild to get to where they are here. And this kind of iteration of the Orioles now being one that is plagued with disappointment and underperformance so far, where they just haven't been able to break through, not a single playoff win. So if they were to suddenly go on a run and win it this year, I mean, I think the amount of excitement would be one thing, but also the amount of just such a big weight lifted off the shoulders of this city in more ways than one.
And hearing fans do that thing where it's like, man, obviously Jalen Brunson, Carl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, like that's such a core, and Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, like that's such a fun group. In terms of how they play basketball, like that team was never down and out. And you talk about those guys, but fans are always like, man, this was for Frank Ntilikina, this was for Kevin Knox, this is for Jeremy Lin,
Evan now.
and going through names of, I mean, guys who either didn't work out or had short spurts where they were great, but the team could never put it together. I'm going to put you on the spot here, but if the Orioles were to get over that hump, 42 years, who are fans like, man, this is for Chris Davis. This is for, like, who is this one for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be for Trey Mancini, for a guy who stuck things through, and Anthony Santander. But going back, Adam Jones, Brian Roberts, there's so many names of guys who have had come through and had such great careers in Baltimore, but just have not been able to get this team over the hump. And certainly, perhaps not to the faults of each of those guys individually, but just as a collective, team hasn't been able to get through. So yeah, there's a long list of names when you go this long without a championship of guys who maybe just share a little piece of that title, even if they aren't on the winning team itself.
And if they're going to ever get over the hump, they might have to be buyers at the trade deadline.
Look
How
at
you
you
like
with the
that,
segue. I like it. I like it. Yeah, in the spirit of optimism here, as the Orioles just this weekend lost 2 of 3 to the San Diego Padres, as we talked about, they are now 34 and 39, but still very much in the wild card hunt. As we've talked about, the American League is wide open. And as we look forward here with the Orioles over the next month and a half, the trade deadline is August 3rd. Not that far away. We're closer now to the trade deadline in the baseball calendar than we are to opening day. So we have kind of reached the halfway point of that section of the baseball season. And for the Orioles, they're a team that's going to be as motivated as any to buy at the deadline if they are even within shouting distance. I have to think if they're within 3 or 4 games of a playoff spot, with the way that last season went, the Orioles are going to go for it. And just how aggressive they might be, we will see. But, with Mike Elias and being the way that this franchise has trended over the past few seasons, you have to think there's a little bit of pressure there where he might think, I might not have to think about the future right now. I need to think about winning in the short term. And maybe they go out and make a little bit more risky of a trade. We've kind of seen them at the trade deadline be active in that they've acquired a bunch of players before, but we haven't really seen them go in and get the superstar. So I want to kind of walk through a few candidates in a piece that I put up last weekend while I was on the road in Toronto of just some way too early candidates to look at with the trade deadline about 6 weeks away.
Matt, can I cut you off before we get into all that? I want to shout out, because this is something that you wrote about this week, going through trade targets, and we're going to get into all that. But I want to at least acknowledge you also wrote a few days ago about just kind of how they got here. I mean, the 2025 fire sale that they had. Orioles, I encourage our listeners to go check out. You had written through a few of the guys who they had gotten back in that haul of that fire sale this time last year, who are playing pretty well. So just as we get into these conversations about inching closer to the trade deadline, this team leaning more toward being buyers at the deadline, I encourage folks who are thinking about how last year unfolded and who are worried that something similar might happen if things don't get better over the next few weeks, to go check out your story just on BaltimoreSun.com about a few of the returnees from that fire sale who have been doing all right in the minor leagues.
Yeah, certainly the between the fire sale that they had last year and the draft that they had with so many draft picks that they had accumulated between competitive balance and trading Brian Baker over to the Tampa Bay Rays, they were able to get quite the draft haul. We've already seen them spin some of those players around, being able to trade Slater DeBrun, who they got in the Brian Baker trade, for Shane Baz in that package, as well as some draft picks. They go out and they get Blaze Alexander for Cade Stroud and 2 prospects, including one they got at the deadline last year, which that Blaze Alexander trade is looking better by the day with Alexander since May 3rd. Third highest OPS in baseball. The only 2 guys better are reigning National League MVP Shohei Ohtani and reigning American League Rookie of the Year Nick Kurtz. That is pretty good company for a guy who right now is batting 9th in the Orioles lineup here. Might be time to consider bumping him up. But let's look at some of these trade candidates here. And before we jump into that, let's look at the positions, actually. three kind of main areas of need that I see with this Orioles roster right now. One is starting pitcher. The rotation has trended in a better direction so far, but if you are still to take this group of starters that the Orioles have right now and line up a playoff rotation, it really clearly is still missing some punch at the top. So, as is always the conversation with this Orioles team, starting pitching is going to be a need at the trade deadline if they're going to be buyers. Back end relief help. Bullpen, always a need for pretty much every contender, could use a back end reliever. But as we've seen with Ryan Helsley out right now on the injured list, hopefully coming back soon, maybe even by Tuesday in Seattle. We'll see. He's on a rehab assignment right now. They have really missed him in the back end. And even when he's back, I think they're going to need at least one other setup man in front of him. So I expect them to be active on that front. And then right-handed outfielder is my third kind of thing on the list. And that kind of comes down to whether or not Tyler O'Neill turns things around.
Yeah, Matt, just to go back to the pictures for a second, this was obviously a conversation that was had so intensely in the offseason of like, is Mike Elias going to do it? Is he going to go out and go sign a big name pitcher to come in and be the guy? And the biggest optimists watching this Orioles offseason and head into the season unfold with the brightest of rose-colored goggles might have thought like this group could figure it out. And we're still having that same conversation about how they didn't do enough to fill their pitching rotation and their bullpen to be to be an above 500 team. And again, we're kind of coming back to that conversation as we get closer to the trade deadline.
Yeah, I mean, it's with starting pitching, it comes down to the fact that they just haven't really signed anybody to long-term deals, and they've been running out, Kyle Bradish, and Dean Kramer and guys who have been under long-term team control from when they were younger. And then it's Zach Eflin they traded for and re-signed to a one-year deal. It's Trevor Rogers who they signed traded for with 2 years on his contract. So they have not gone out in free agency and gotten that guy who could kind of anchor their rotation. The Pete Alonso of the pitching staff, you might say. But at the same time, with the state of everything right now, it's no surprise that pitching would be at the top of the list.
I'm going to make one more Knicks comment before we get into our list of guys. The Knicks bought their team when they were interviewing players on the podium after the win. Josh Hart invoked, is it the Rams GM who had said,
F them picks.
For our PG audience, forget them picks. That's kind of sports these days. Like, it's becoming harder and harder in the four major professional sports to go win a championship by building a team. You have to buy at least some. Obviously, the Orioles did spend money on going to buy Pete Alonso, but like, you got to buy a lot to really contend because there are teams who are going to buy more than you. And it's great to be able to have homegrown talent, be the face of your franchise, but to win the big one, you gotta go spend some money. So let's talk about some guys.
Let's talk about some guys. And the number one player that every team could use at the trade deadline is Tarik Skubal, the Detroit Tigers star pitcher, two-time Cy Young winner, who is set to return from the injured list, had an elbow loose body surgery, but kind of a new cutting edge type of it, and is coming back here in just about a little over a month's time. So pretty impressive turnaround for Skubal, who undoubtedly will command a significant prospect package at the trade deadline. He only is signed through this year, so a free agent after the season. And for him, certainly does help his market to get traded because of the qualifying offer, which would mean that he would have a draft pick compensation attached to him. But if you're traded, the qualifying offer is not allowed to be given to you. So that would be a big boost for him as he looks to get paid in free agency. And whatever team does go out and acquire him has to know that he's going to be hitting the open market and they're going to have to bid just like everybody else. So there's no real advantage to trading for him other than getting him down the stretch. My thing is just with the Orioles, I'm not sure that their farm system has enough punch to get there.
Feels like a when pigs fly situation. As you said, the Orioles just don't have enough. Other teams have enough to go get a guy like that the Tigers are going to be far more intrigued by. So this, I mean, obviously it would be amazing. It just feels like the longest shot of anyone on the list. Worth mentioning nonetheless. That would be this is the ultimate pipe dream, right? But again, it just feels like there's just no shot, right?
Just about the only way I think they could do it is if they were willing to trade Jackson Holliday. And I don't really see that being the case. So Probably going to have to cross off Scoopel, but
You're not
there are
you're not trading Jackson Holiday for a guy who's going to be here for 4 months.
exactly. It's just not good business, and that's what the Tigers are going to have to try to exploit because there's going to be some team that is desperate enough to get the number one starting pitcher in baseball in their rotation. And maybe maybe the Orioles should really think about pushing all their chips in on 2026. They've already pushed a lot, but that would really be going all in and actively detracting from your lineup a little bit, which has been improving over the last few weeks, but certainly still has some flaws in its own right. And you expect Jackson Holiday to be a huge part of that lineup moving forward. But there are a lot of other starting pitchers, I think, that actually could still slot in potentially as the Orioles' number one. And the one that jumps out to me the most is Freddie Peralta of the New York Mets. The Orioles were connected to Peralta over the offseason. He was with the Milwaukee Brewers then, a guy who was viewed as a very stable, maybe not like 1A starter, more like a 1B starter, but still a very reliable starting pitcher, gives a lot of innings, keeps his ERA in the mid to low threes, was coming off of an excellent career year with the Brewers, and obviously they cash in trading him to the Mets, who have since fallen out of contention. So I expect the Mets to be sellers. We're not sure yet. It's still, with a lot of these teams, and even the Tigers, could turn things around and try to give it one last go with Scooble. But for the Mets right now, at the bottom of the standings in the NL East, and have really been underperforming here for the last year and a half. I fully expect them to be sellers at this point, and I think Peralta could be the kind of the big consolation prize for whatever team doesn't get Scooble.
Yeah, you just took the words out of my mouth, and I think you would put this in your story too. That in the Scooble is the shiny toy at the top of the list, and Peralta's the consolation prize that feels like the Orioles might have a little bit more skin in the game, a little bit more willingness to move some pieces, to go get a guy like that. Just because that's a position of, to your point, like they're not pushing all of their chips in on 2026, but they should probably push some chips in if they really feel like this is a team that can do something in the back half. And Freddie Peralta feels like maybe a more fair, calculated, smart business move rather than trying to do something crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, Peralta's numbers this year aren't super crazy. He's got a 4.04 ERA, a WHIP over 1.3. His strikeout rate is down a tick, but at the same time, he's got a very long track record. He's obviously pitching in a tough situation with the Mets not being contenders, where he's been pitching for a very good Milwaukee team over the years. So you never know what a change of scenery might do. And honestly, and that's kind of the case with a couple of these guys. Like, the Orioles have a pretty good track record of taking pitchers who maybe didn't succeed elsewhere and helping them hit their stride in Baltimore. So I think you have to take those numbers with a grain of salt a little bit. And, I think the Orioles have a lot of faith that if they get one or two of these guys into their room, they're going to be able to tap into that potential, whatever that may look like. So for Peralta, if they were to acquire him, I think right now he would be, if the Orioles lined up a playoff rotation, he would be their number one.
For sure. Matt, you have two other starting pitchers on the list. Who are those?
Yeah, so both guys here want to mention are under team control for multiple years, which is intriguing for the Orioles because they have Trevor Rogers be hitting free agency after this year. Chris Bassett is obviously on a one-year deal as well. So somebody that could help anchor their rotation next year, in addition to this year, I think would be really appealing for this front office. They obviously did that with Zach Eflin, knowing that Corbin Burns was going to be a free agent in 2024. They go out and trade for Eflin at the deadline, who was signed through the following season. The same thing with Trevor Rogers, who had 2 years of team control after that. So it was a clear need at the deadline for starting pitching, but also they knew that it was going to be one over the offseason, so they kind of got a jump start on that. So two guys here that jump off the page to me are Cole Reagans, of the Kansas City Royals, and Sandy Alcantara of the Miami Marlins. Now for Reagans, he's been on the IL since May 8th with an elbow impingement, so obviously his health is going to be part of this. But he is, I think, in the Royals are being floated as sellers right now with the way that their season has gone. You could look at multiple guys in that rotation, all of whom are under multiple years of team control, including Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. I think the Royals could be enticed to trading any one of these three guys, and Reagans is probably the top option among the three. Certainly in 24, when they played him in the playoffs, was one of their best starting pitchers, placed fourth in Cy Young voting. So I would be really intrigued if you're able to pry Cole Reagans away, who, again, a 4.84 ERA and 8 starts for the Royals this year, but his track record says he's a much better pitcher than that, especially when fully healthy.
Matt, can I put you on the spot a little bit before we get into relief pitchers and before we get into position players and kind of wrap around this list? If we're just kind of looking at starting pitchers specifically, from those four, one, who do you feel like is the most plausible, likely, realistic option, and what might that package look like for the Orioles?
Yeah, I think honestly, Sandy Alcantara, the last name there, is probably the most likely to be moved. The Marlins have really been trying to trade him for a couple of years now. It's been a few years since he won the Cy Young, and his value took a hit as he really struggled to live up to those heights. And this year, still a bit uneven, but we have seen some really good outings from him that remind you that that kind of pitcher is still in there. So I think the Orioles could definitely be connected to Sandy Alcantara at the deadline, and for what a package might look like. I mean, he signed through 2027 as a team option there. So for the Orioles to go out and get a guy with 2 years of team control, I think you look at the Zach Eflin trade as kind of a comp there, which was really no top 100 guys were traded in that. And honestly, for Sandy, probably, maybe they trade one like a Luis De Leon, a guy who's on some top 100 lists, not all of them, or Wahiva Aloy, who's tearing it up after being drafted as a first round pick last year. So maybe a guy who's kind of a fringe top 100 to anchor that deal, and then two or three other guys from their farm system in terms of the top 30 lists. So for like a Sandy Alcantara trade, just spitballing right here, if the Orioles were to swing a competitive deal, I think maybe it could look like Trey Gibson anchoring that deal. He's fringe top 100, and let's see, let's go with Aloy,
Mm,
um, and I'll say Esteban Mejia, who Mejia is I believe 20 years old, 19 years old, down in rookie ball right now, walking a ton of guys, but he throws 102 and really wowed a lot of scouts in his first taste of pro ball last year. So kind of a lottery ticket type player to give up. So yeah, I mean the Orioles and Marlins have matched up on trades before. Obviously the Kyle Stowers, Trevor Rogers trade with Connor Norby in there as well is the big one. But yeah, that's probably about what I'd expect for Alcantara, which that does feel a little rich as I'm saying it. But Alcantara's ceiling, certainly is one that is the best pitcher in baseball. So if there is kind of be a bidding war here, I think the Marlins are going to do well once they finally do pull the trigger on a trade.
I was going to say the expectation if you're getting a guy like Sandy Alcantara is that he's going to come in and be your number one. And if you're thinking about it through that lens, then the idea of what you're giving up changes. If you're thinking about it as a risk you're not positive what you're going to get out of him, and maybe he slides down your pitching rotation a little bit, maybe you think about what you're willing to give up differently. But if the expectation is you have all the confidence in the world that he's going to come in and be the guy, then I think in 2026 at this deadline, you're probably willing to have more of that conversation.
Yeah. And it also depends on what these teams are looking for in terms of major league ready prospects. The Marlins have been bad for a while and have a young core they're trying to build around. Maybe they're looking for more guys who are major league ready. I mean, Trey Gibson certainly fits that mold, but perhaps they'd be more interested in an Enrique Bradfield Jr. Or a Nestor Herman, two guys who are in AAA right now and maybe could be in the major leagues by the end of the year. So that also will change the calculus here as we get closer to the deadline. But let's look at some relievers, shall we?
Let's do it.
Uh, like I said, this is an area of need that's pretty much for every team. I think every team is going to be looking for relief help at the trade deadline, if not one, more than one. And a lot of these guys, there's going to be a lot of competition for them as they're with the state of baseball right now, and a lot of teams kind of being in it. The relief market might not be super deep, and you might actually have to give up a little bit more to get relievers this year than you typically do, just because of kind of how wide open things are. And that's what the third wild card, the institution of that a few years ago, has really done for baseball as well. As there are fewer clear-cut sellers than there used to be in Major League Baseball, and also that's I think also a testament to the way that tanking has kind of changed in baseball. Not as many teams are clearly, not gunning for the basement. There's a lottery now in the draft and things like that. So it just, when there are a reliever or two that have closing experience and can throw hard, fit in the back end of your bullpen with a lot of strikeouts, that guy is going to command a significant haul even for a reliever. And I'll group two of these guys together.
I was just gonna say before you go, you talk about guys who can throw hard. First guy on the list is the epitome of a guy who can throw the ball pretty hard.
Yeah, Aroldis Chapman has thrown the hardest pitch in MLB history. And I was actually just looking at the list the other day of like the hardest pitches ever thrown in the Statcast era, or the pitch tracking era, so 2008 to present. And two of them are by Aroldis Chapman against the Orioles, two of the top four, which is pretty crazy. So yeah, the Orioles have seen some pretty hard velo over the years from this guy, and he's also spent a lot of time in the AL East. Currently with the Boston Red Sox, a minuscule .44 ERA on the year. Chapman just has been able to withstand father time. He's 38 years old and remains as elite a closer as there is in baseball. And whether the Orioles bring him in to bump Ryan Helsley down or to make him the setup man with Helsley as the closer, that would be the hardest throwing duo in baseball, to have the two of them together. Obviously, you can rely on either of them in save situations. They've been there, they've done that, they played for contending teams. So it would be certainly a formidable duo. And then Kenley Jansen as well, who is with the Detroit Tigers. And for Jansen not having as great of a year, his ERA is at a 4.5 this year, but his Ks are up. So I think some of the peripherals look pretty good for him, where you'd think that ERA is going to come down a little bit. Another guy that has been around, done it, won championships, and been one of the elite closers of the entire era here over the last 15 years. So with Jansen or Chapman, I think you're pretty happy to get either of those guys in your bullpen, and they might not even be the number one reliever that is going to be sought after at this deadline. That, I believe, is going to be Antonio Senzatella. Not a name that really has a lot of traction here among fans, but for Senzatella, who was really an abysmal starter for the Colorado Rockies, terrible ERAs over the years, and it's tough to pitch in cores. He switched to reliever full-time this year and has been excellent so far this season, looking like an all-star for the Rockies. And with their new front office coming in, their front office who they plucked their GM from the Browns, fun fact, one of the same guys that signed off in the Deshaun Watson deal, fun fact. But yeah, not exactly
That's
inspiring
not a fun fact,
there.
but it's a fact.
It's a fact, all right. But they are, at least the Rockies have kind of fended off selling for so long, and now it looks like they're finally embracing who they are and who they need to be in order to become contenders again, with how bad they have been over the years. And Senzatella looks like a guy that very much will be shopped at the deadline. He has a $14 million option for next year, team option, so maybe the Rockies pay that down a little bit to sweeten the deal, but $14 million isn't crazy for a back end reliever. Certainly, Ryan Helsley's making $12.5 million, so as long as you're getting elite level production, it's something that you can swallow as a contender. So Senzatella is definitely somebody who I think is going to command a decent return. And then last one, Sam, is Pete Fairbanks, a guy that Orioles fans are familiar with from his time with the Tampa Bay Rays. He is with the Miami Marlins this year, having a bit of a tough season for sure. 6.63 ERA, but also has closing experience. Somebody who I think maybe a cheaper option if you're looking for either a second reliever or somebody who isn't going to cost a ton of prospects because you went in at another position. I think that Fairbanks is somebody the Orioles could be interested in, as, again, somebody that they could see things they like in him and maybe turn things around. He's somebody who I thought, he was available late into free agency this offseason. He's someone who I thought the Orioles might bring in as a setup man, because they didn't make a ton of moves for proven help in front of Ryan Helsley this offseason. And towards the end of the offseason, I thought Fairbanks might be a good fit. He ends up going to Miami, but at the same time, somebody who, like I said, a lot of familiarity there, and maybe they like what they see enough to bring him in and do some tweaks if they can get him for the right price.
Yeah, Fairbanks feels like maybe a more classic Orioles decision, where you can kind of buy low with the confidence that you can squeeze out sort of some of the last bit of juice, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. Just going back, you mentioned Chapman and Jansen. I think those are two guys that when you're looking at rentals, you're not super concerned about their age. Again, as you said, both playing at a high level. So I guess I should ask you the same question I did with the starters, kind of looking at those four relief pitchers. Which one of those do you feel like is, the most probable, the most realistic, and what might a package look like for that?
I mean, Fairbanks is probably the most realistic, but I think this is an area the Orioles will need to kind of go all in. And so I'm going to say that Chapman is going to be the hardest to get, and maybe they go out and get Jansen or Senzatella. So if they get Jansen, I mean, really what you're giving up there for a guy who's on a rental contract, nothing crazy. Even being a reliever, as far as a guy, like I would probably say like a lottery ticket type prospect that you feel good about. Just like looking at the Orioles top 30, like they definitely. Who do I like here? Let's say they trade Wilfrey De La Cruz, who's in rookie ball right now, a shortstop there, and has been getting off to a nice start to his North American debut with the Orioles. So a guy who is only 18 years old, but has a lot of upside, good tools, somebody that the Tigers could kind of buy into. Maybe it's him and a Creed Willems type, somebody in AAA who they just don't really have room for, and he's been having a great season offensively, but with him being a mostly full-time catcher. He plays first base as well. Both those positions are pretty locked up in Baltimore right now, so not a whole lot of room for him. So maybe they could sweeten it. A Wilfrey De La Cruz, Creed Willems package for Kenley Jansen certainly feels realistic.
I like the sound of that. And then to kind of close out this list here, you have in our doc, let's get weird. Say
Let's
more.
get weird, and let's take a step back here of just the candidates for a second. With this Orioles deadline, and where they have been over the years, not being able to win in the playoffs, you just have to feel like at some point, Mike Elias has got to pull the trigger on a big name, on something that's maybe even surprising, maybe even something you don't necessarily need, but undoubtedly makes your roster better. And at the end of the day, that is what the deadline is supposed to do. Yes, you got to plug holes where you have holes. Pitching is number one going to be the need for this team. And you go out and you get a Freddie Peralta at the trade deadline, and you get a Pete Fairbanks for the back end of the bullpen. Just with those two guys, I think that's a huge win for the Orioles. But if you look at this team and you say this team can do things, you say 2026 is the year we need to win, and we're doing everything we can to do it. Why not trade for Byron Buxton? All right, I'm not saying there is a perfect fit here, but Buxton, who is signed through 2028 for $15 million a year each of the next 2 seasons, one of the top center fielders in all of baseball, already up to 22 home runs this year. You put him at center field, immediately lengthens your lineup and gives you security at a spot where you have Taylor Ward entering free agency after this year. You have Tyler O'Neill potentially signed through next season, but not hitting very well. You have Dylan Beavers and Colton Cowser, 2 young guys who have shown plenty in spurts, but have not necessarily put it all together. Cowser more so than Beavers. Beavers younger and not as much time to develop to this point. You have Leody Taveras, a free agent after this year. Heston Kjerstad, who knows what he's going to get. This outfield right now is screaming for somebody it can rely on. And they thought Tyler O'Neill was going to be that guy. Not to this point has he been that. Byron Buxton, who is valued for his leadership, a guy who has been to the playoffs with the Twins, who has a veteran in this league, a star at his position, a brand name, kind of like Pete Alonso is somebody who I think would immediately raise the ceiling and floor of this team. And Buxton has injury issues. He's 32 years old right now, and he's a lengthy injury history. Not a guy that you're necessarily counting on to play 100 games, but he's only making $15 million a year. That's okay. That's an affordable price, I think, for a guy who has such a high ceiling and is still playing at such an elite level at 32 years old. He would change the complete entire complexion of the Orioles lineup right now. And I think that with the needs that they have for the future in their outfield, he checks off more than one box there.
You kind of said it there, but so much of the conversation we've been having about pitching is like, how can they make this team better now in order to be good in the fall, like closer to the fall, late in the summer of 2026? This feels like a move that would be good in the short term, but really valuable in the long term. And that's not something you really talk a lot about at the trade deadline. Those are the conversations that are had as you're assembling your roster in the offseason. That's exactly what this would be, is you would feel like, okay, this can help us now, but this is really going to stabilize a position that we would feel really, that we don't feel amazing about right now. This would help kind of stabilize that over the next couple of years, you'd hope.
Yeah, and just as we always talk about the Orioles needing starting pitching help, they also always seem to need right-handed hitters as well, and Buxton checks off that box. He is a very good defensive center fielder, so with their outfield last year being really bad defensively, and this year with Colton Cowser being pretty good and the Taylor Ward being league average, and right now Leo Gutierrez grading out below average, he would certainly raise the defensive side of this team as well. So a lot of things to like, I think, about Byron Buxton, who it would take a significant price to get him. He's kind of the franchise player, a guy who, even as the Twins have gone into a rebuild, has remained loyal and said he wants to stay in Minnesota, which is rare to see in today's game and today across sports really in general. But Buxton is a guy who I think is a great character fit and also somebody who would just completely provide a massive upgrade for this team in an area that maybe isn't at the top of the list, but certainly still an area of need for the Orioles as they look to potentially turn their season around and force their way into the wild card hunt and beyond.
Begs the question, right? If they go for Buxton, what might that package look like?
It's tough to say. Right now, their number one prospect is Nate George. I would imagine the Twins would be looking for him, a guy with, as they try to trade, a guy with 2.5 years of control. I would be interested in that if I'm Michael Elias. Like I talked about, it's right now you're looking to win in 2026. You might not see Nate George play a game for the Baltimore Orioles. He's in high A right now. He's actually hurt or on the injured list right now, but he's in high A this season. Like a guy who is at least 2 years away at best in terms of contributing at the major league level. So, are you going to still be the general manager in 2028? Who knows? But you are the general manager in 2026, and right now there's a lot of pressure to go out and improve this team and make the playoffs one way or another. And there isn't some injured player who's coming back and going to provide some massive boost for this team, aside from Ryan Helsley in the bullpen. I think that something like that would be shocking for sure, but I think it would make a lot of sense the more you peel back the layers.
It's just nice that we're having this conversation about the Orioles being buyers, considering where this team has been over the last few months. Their roller coaster ride at times, and their ability to stick with it, their ability to stay in the hunt, their ability to stay in the fight, and their ability to stay standing on 2 feet.
Yeah, and it's still very much an up and down roller coaster. I wrote in my takeaways today that they've been a seesaw, and right now they lose 4 in a row, they win 3 in a row, they lose 2 games in a row, and now they go to Seattle in the West Coast trip, looking to get something on a run. Yeah, and we'll see how that works out on the road. We're going to switch over to Ravens now and talk about Tyler Loop. All right, Sam. So you were out at minicamp last week. We had Josh on Wednesday to talk about just kind of his takeaways from that. But anything that left over from there that just kind of stood out to you?
I think the big one is the one that I want to talk with you about today, which was the fact that Tyler spoke for the first time since we talked to him within an hour or two after he missed the biggest kick of his life in Pittsburgh in Week 18. This is something that I think had been written about a lot at the time. Like, he handled that so admirably. Not a lot of guys, and I don't mean to point the finger. This isn't a jab, but it said something that Mark Andrews didn't talk after his goal line drop in Buffalo, and that we didn't hear from him for months after. And Tyler was willing to face the cameras. As a rookie, to do that is really impressive. This was the first time we got a chance to hear him talk since that. And obviously the big question is how has he spent these last few months compartmentalizing what happened, turning the page, and moving forward. And was just really impressed with the way that kid handled himself. His ability to walk up there with a big smile, knowing every question that was coming his way, he was ready for. It was obvious what we were going to ask him about, and he handled everything like a pro. He handled it like a champ, and generally he's a pretty introspective kid. He's a thoughtful kid. So I was impressed with the way that he handled himself, and just kind of hearing him talk about his coming out of that kick and settling himself, and the confidence that he spoke with to kind of come back and say, like, that his confidence in coming out of that and moving forward from that night.
Yeah, and we have his clip right here, so let's play that for you guys.
The biggest thing that I did was just acknowledge and accept it, and it took a day or two. And I would say moving on from the kick itself was pretty easy. Just because I know, like, you got to be ready for the next kick. You got to be able to put it behind you, and confident in the process that I've developed. But I'd say the biggest part of moving on was just letting the people that I care about and the people that care about me know, like, hey, I'm good. Nothing's changed for me. I would still, I still feel confident in my abilities. And once I let the people who care about me and love me know, like, hey, I'm good, then it was easy to just move on and be like, all right, we're in the off season. It's time to kind of reset and reload. And so that was the biggest thing, was just getting with the people I care about, getting going. I was super fortunate. I had a couple other kickers around the league reach out to me. Their wives actually reached out to my wife, or I guess my fiance at the time. And so that was really cool. I had a few guys check in on me a couple days later. Hey, how you doing? I was like, oh man, I'm great. Like, ready to go. No one wishes they had that kickback more than me, but gotta move on.
Tyler.
Honestly, really impressed there with his poise. Like you said, he felt prepared for every answer, but also for him to come out and say, like, it wasn't hard moving on from that. I was prepared for that kind of thing. I've done, have to move on from kicks all the time. Misses is part of it. And it was really about, talking to my family, and he gets people, other kickers, NFL kickers reaching out to him, everything like that. Didn't sound to me like a guy who has the yips.
No, not at all. I think that a lot of us probably watched that kick and thought, you can't blame a kid for going out there in the biggest kick of his life on the road with all those yellow towels waving, and to just be a little spooked by that moment. And that's why he was a little bit off. That's not something he did or ever would admit. But I thought that one of the more interesting things, and we're going to kind of get into all this, but like one of the more interesting things I thought he said was this idea that like people don't understand him, the position he's in, and where he's at in his career. Anyone who doesn't kick in the NFL wouldn't understand the amount of confidence that kid has. And that's part of what he was trying to articulate, is that the day after, the morning after that kick, he drove to Owings Mills. He was in a meeting with his fellow specialists, and they rewatched the kick. They figured out what went wrong, which he knew pretty much right away that his toe kind of scraped the ground ever so slightly, and that ruined his process. And then he hit the ball a little low, and obviously it goes wide right. But he goes in the next day. They rewatch the kick as a specialist group. They talk about it, and he hadn't watched it since, but his confidence to just kind of move on from that, and for him to talk so calmly about this idea that, like, one, kicking is a very factual position. You either make a kick or you don't, but he has the confidence in himself that the idea of missing that, like he said that he walked up there with, like, I never once even thought about the idea of this being a miss. But two, that he's just so confident in himself that it's like, why would this ever happen again? To your point about, like, he doesn't sound like someone with the yips. He sounds like someone who, that was just another kick, and he's moved on, and that doesn't matter anymore. Which I think was the toughest part, because Ravens fans have spent months agonizing about that. Let me say this, maybe they spent a couple days agonizing, and then it got John Harbaugh fired, so the group of the fan base that maybe wanted that felt good about it. But for him, it didn't take him long to move on from the kick, because he has just this supreme confidence in himself that, like, why would he ever think that's going to happen again? He's such a good kicker. In his mind, I'm just saying this, in his mind, he's thinking, I'm such a good kicker. Why would this ever happen again? I made one mistake, and I'm going to work on it, and we're going to fix it. But, like, I think that's fascinating to have that kind of confidence, to not spiral at all. Which maybe he did, and he's not going to admit. Like, that's entirely a possibility. But for him, again, just going back to him speaking with that bravado to him, he watched it once. He hadn't really thought about it since. He had a really great, past couple months. He got married. He's back in the lab, and he's ready to get going.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't go and draft a kicker unless you're sure he's going to be able to handle the moment, and not to say that he necessarily did in that moment. He obviously missed the kick, but to be able to come back from that and have the psyche to withstand a moment like that in your career, you don't necessarily know that a guy is going to be able to handle that as the draft process, but it certainly has to be part of your thinking of, is this guy who we are investing significant capital in here for, especially for a kicker, is he somebody who we can trust? And that is a question that you have to ask yourself very early on in the evaluation process. So I've said this multiple times on this exact programming here. I'm a full believer in Tyler Loop. You know, he definitely struggled from 50 plus last year, and that's something that I think is going to have to improve as the time goes on for Loop. But I do think that he was put in a really tough spot that maybe he wasn't prepared for, just because the Ravens didn't have the faith in him in those situations throughout the season. But now he's at least been able to get some experience there, and we see if he can learn from it or not.
He had said that night that they have a 1 minute rule, which is that you can think about a miss for exactly 60 seconds, and then you got to move on because that's just the nature of the position. He admitted this kind of took him a day or two, but he was able to move on. He had to settle some people around him. That was maybe the hardest part, was all the people in his life who took a lot of the online vitriol, who were on the wrong side of memes and AI slop and just the darkest corners of the internet. But turning the page a little bit, I mean, you said it there, the idea of like his ability to meet the moment. Two things. One, he was asked smartly, if you're in that position again in 7 months from the same distance in the same place, season on the line. Side note, I totally forgot this insane stat that's the only kick in NFL history as time expired in week 18 to decide the playoff fate of both teams. That's insane.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of weight for the rookie, but that was a crazy stat that I as we were this past week kind of thinking about. But he
Yeah,
was asked, if you're go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that in the Venn diagram of people who were spreading online hate to Tyler Loop and his fiance on social media, and the people that were booing Manny Machado at Camden Yards this weekend, I think they are the people that are in the center right there. Grade A losers, in my opinion. If
Yes.
you are going on a player's fiance's page and shit talking, get a life.
Insane. So he was asked, if you're in that position again, does your process change? Are there things you learn from that kick that changes how you approach the next kick? And it says everything about his confidence for him to not hesitate and say no. His process isn't changing. He's just going to walk up with more confidence. He's going to refine some things, but his process is what got him, his kicking process and his talent and his ability to do it is what got him to be the first kicker drafted in Ravens history. It got him to be kicking 90% from 90% field goals last season. It got him to the point where he didn't miss a single kick within 50 yards until that final kick in week 18. So his process isn't changing. He said he'll just kind of refine it and it'll be a confidence thing. The obvious follow-up question to that is, how do you put yourself in a position to come close to shouldering that kind of pressure, to simulate that kind of pressure, so you're a little bit more prepared next time without only being able to think about week 18 in, I guess technically it was 2026, January 4th, 2026. The next time that happens, how can you kind of put yourself in those positions between now and then so you're a little bit more prepared? Maybe the most obvious, as you had mentioned, he just didn't have that many opportunities in 2025. He was not called on for very many deep kicks. I think he took 3 kicks. Before that kick, he took 3 in the fourth quarter all season. He was not spending a lot of time footing a ball through the uprights, either for the win in any kind of decisive manner throughout the majority of the season. But, and this is, it dwarfs in comparison, and maybe it's silly, but the idea that I think we've talked plenty in this podcast about this: be at your best when your best is needed. Period. That Jesse Minter does. Maybe it was on purpose because they knew that we were going to get Tyler Loop on that last day of minicamp, and they knew that this was kind of setting up a storyline. Everyone was going to write about it if he does it. But Jesse Minter put Loop on the spot at the end of practice to say, "Hey, 25 minutes left to practice. You're going to kick this ball from 40 yards, and if you miss it, we're going to keep practicing and then have post-practice meetings. And if you make it, everyone gets to go on summer vacation early." And Tyler was like, "Cool." And he looked at Jesse Minter and he looked at Ryan Eckley, the rookie punter, and he said, "Get ready to go home, guys." And that, again, is nowhere near the level of moment that he had to face in week 18, but he's not hesitating. And that's presumably what Randy Brown saw in him when he was canvassing the country to try to find the Justin Tucker successor, was a kid who had that level of confidence and bravado that if something like this happens, he'll be able to bounce back. And he made a kick, and everyone was happy, and everyone got to go home early. So happy summer vacation.
I had that exact situation at a practice one year, and our teammate missed the kick, and we had to practice for another 30 minutes. My
No.
high school football team, yep, and we all, yeah, we had some fun with him
Ouch.
in the locker room after practice, to say the least. To say the
Um,
least.
Not great, not great.
So that's
But
pressure. That is pressure.
yeah,
I mean,
it is.
all your teammates are looking to you to get the rest of the day off, and it's as much as pressure as you can simulate, in June.
And exactly, and it's probably, I mean, take it for what you will. That night that it happened, Jordan Stout, former All-Pro punter for the Ravens, now playing for John Harbaugh in New York, said, they're gonna make a movie about this kid one day. Like, spends every day all season with Loop, and when he misses that kick, one of the last things Jordan Stout said that night is like, get ready, because this kid's gonna be good, and they're gonna make a movie about him one day from this kick to where he's gonna be at the end of his career, which, of course, a teammate is gonna be so supportive. But if he has the career that those folks expect him to, and if we ever get to that point where they're making a film, I don't expect him to ever make a film about a kicker. But if it happens, then the 40-yarder to end practice will certainly make the cut. They'll call up the Ravens for some footage of that kick and the ensuing celebration, and him explaining that he looked at Minter and he looked at Eckley and he said, "Get ready to go home, guys," and he made the kick. So a feather in his cap, a chance to have that kind of simulated pressure, because the Ravens are going to rely on him in 2026. They're going to need to rely on their kicker. There's a lot of expectations for what this offense can be, but this was the conversation all of last year. Is in training camp, John Harbaugh got so many questions about, you have a team with Super Bowl aspirations. Do you feel confident that a rookie kicker can help you meet the moment if called upon? Unequivocally, yes. He felt like he felt confident in Loop. That's why they drafted him. And he got to that point and he didn't do it. And this is, again, a team with Super Bowl aspirations. And the question now becomes, you have a second-year kicker who missed the biggest kick of his life and the biggest kick of the NFL season last year. Do you feel confident in him to, if put in this position again, do you have the confidence in him to make it this time and to help get the Ravens over the hump? Which begs the question, Matt, Jesse Minter didn't close the door. Do you think they bring in competition for training camp this August?
I could see them doing it, but honestly, I think maybe it's one of there's just somebody else in camp to push him. But I have to think that Tyler Loop is still going to be the near lock to be the starting kicker week one. That's just my gut with this team and how much capital they invested in him. To give up on him that quickly, I think would be a mistake. So I think it'll be Tyler Loop kicking week one, no matter what. There might be another name to talk about there along the way, but I still think the path still leads to Loop week one.
Completely agree. And Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti did say this. I'm trying to remember if Eric DeCosta said something similar, or if Jesse Minter probably didn't say it, but I remember Steve Bisciotti saying, like, Loop's our kicker, like, he's our guy. I don't think anything has changed on that front, but if you're bringing in someone else, you are, just for sake of August competition, to push Loop a little bit. They can learn from one another, and he probably gives Loop a day off or so, like here and there, to take a few more kicks so you can get the significant reps that you need for your special teams unit without putting too much on Loop's leg to have to kick every single day.
100%. All right. Sam, we're going to go ahead and wrap there. Thank you. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. Give us a follow on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys get your podcasts. And check us out on social media as well at Sun Early Birds over on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Sam, any final words for the good people?
Just to continue to encourage our listeners and readers to send us thoughts, send us feedback, send us questions you have. We'd love to integrate that into the show, and excited to get a little summer vacation before training camp.
Yeah, and my final words are, if you haven't gone to the movies and seen the movie Obsession yet, you have to go. It was phenomenal movie.
It was on my list. I had plans to go see it, and then those plans fell apart. So I'll take your word for it.
100%.
Like, as in, I will go see it. Yeah.
Do it. Jacob saw it the other night too. He doesn't even watch horror movies, and he loves it. So tells you everything you need to know. All right, y'all. Thank you so much, and have a good one.